Howdy, Mike. Welcome, everybody, to another Friday evening where we're going to take a look at some of the weather going on around the states and around the world as we're in that transition in the Northern Hemisphere between spring and summer, or depending on how far north you go, the latter part of winter and into spring. Things are getting active. The same is true in Australia as we look down under. It's just that time of year that you're excited to be a meteorologist. You're excited to be a weatherman, excited to be a storm chaser. There's just a lot happening. I'm going to start very quickly with a quick shout out to the radar, and we've got a lot of storms here and there under warnings. We had some big weather in the Carolinas, now developing in the southeast, across Kansas, Nebraska, and then some chilly weather as we look to the Mountain West. All right, let's start on the Twitter and some of the things I have liked over the last 24 hours. Pop this up full screen, and that's just for you, Michael G. Probably overseas, still looking around. Stu brings us into the Bay of Kamchatka. Oh, why can't I say that? These all things work in my head, and then you go to say it. It's been so long in the years, but we're looking at the Gulf of Mexico and the Yucatan just right in through here, and we could begin to see a little bit of circulation. It looks like it winds down, but nevertheless, we've got some rotation going on. This I found curious and thought I'd just throw it in there because it's kind of curious. They're talking about ultraviolet and how that can kill the virus. And there was a lot of poo-pooing about that earlier on, but we come to see the wisdom of UVC in intense, brief bursts. And that's how the Metropolitan Transportation Authority is beginning to deal with some of the COVID disinfectant on the trains. It's a lot quicker, potentially, to do the disinfection that way rather than having to wipe down every single surface. If you're in the States, here we come. The 17-year cicada is to emerge in 3 states a little bit later on this spring. So summer could be just a little bit noisier than it typically is because we're in that cycle. All right, off towards Europe and the Sofia province in Bulgaria on May 20th. So that's been about 2.5 days ago, if you consider the time zone change. But we've got some hail, and obviously this is melted because these tend to be very spiky when they first hit the ground. Even as they drop below the freezing level coming out of the base of the thunderstorm, they begin to melt instantly if they're not lofted back up into the thunderstorm to get another coating of ice. Severe weather rather prevalent today from all the way. They were anticipating some even into the Central Prairie provinces of Canada, all the way through the Northern Plains states and down into Texas. And that has been realized, as we'll take a look in a moment. And then there's a term that you'll often see as we get into spring season, and that's the omega block, or a blocking pattern. And it is named after the Greek letter omega. We can see the shape of the letter there, and then in the jet stream pattern, deep trough out west. Then it has to arc up and over a ridge that separates the two cutoff lows or approachingly cutoff lows. As long as we've got isobars that are iso heights that are closed off, we tend to give it that designation because it is kind of separate from the main part of the jet stream up ahead. But that's an omega block. They're often persistent simply because they have consumed the whole depth of the jet stream, the breadth to the width, and that compression brings the whole jet stream in. Part of it stays up above, and the rest of it has to be cut off down and below, and that allows for a very slow progression. And that's the case we are seeing right now. We saw that with the flooding up in Michigan earlier today, some flooding in the Carolinas earlier this afternoon, and I believe yesterday as well. So that's an omega block. That's why it is named that. Look at Lubbock, Texas. Ooh, that got loud, doesn't it? As they contending with a little bit of hail. That's kind of painful if you've just gone to the greenhouse and brought in some flowers, got them in your garden. In this case, maybe not. But that kind of hail tends to be rather damaging, can even knock out some of those those ceiling lights, those roof lights in these kind of homes. But that's what is what's happening with these incredible storms. And it was just a photographer's just dream to be out in Kansas and the eastern plains of Colorado last night. Some incredible photography here that was shared on Twitter. Again, it's all copyrighted, but this is as we had two clusters, two cells eventually merged. One literally was rotated and then folded into the other. And if you can have your shutter open as you end up with a lightning strike, then all the better as far as the beauty shots are concerned. Another shot out of base hunters chasing in Latkin, Texas. I believe that's out near Sublette or GJK, Grand Junction, Kansas, out in that particular direction, and it's wide open. Lots of roads, farm roads you can go and storm chase. Fencing is your biggest hurdle out there, but it really is kind of a joy to go out there. And it looks like as the rain comes on through, this is going to be a recurring theme as quite a bit of moisture forecast for those southern plain states and into the central plain states through the weekend and quite honestly for probably the better part of 10 days. This was Charlotte, North Carolina today as they dealt with some very strong straight line winds and tipped over a large tree, and somebody gets to go cut that down. And maybe they'll use it for firewood. Maybe it'll just simply be hauled off. Today also being the anniversary of the Joplin, Missouri tornado back in 2011, the seventh deadliest tornado in U.S. history. It was an F5 on the Fujita scale with 158 confirmed dead and over 1,150 injured with $2.8 billion in damage done. That is just, it's almost incomprehensible to wake up and see that kind of storm. Down in Australia, they had kind of a stormy week with a lot of clouds and some heavy rains, especially in the northern part of Queensland through the northern part of the continent, and just cold and unsettled weather continuing to rake the Perth, Byron Bay South, Brisbane, then on towards Canberra and Melbourne. Very unsettled. But as we get later to this coming weekend, Sunday, Monday time zone, got another remnant of a tropical storm coming in from the northwest in combination with a cold front, and that will yield kind of some stormy conditions and a lot of wind as we Perth and then points off to the north. As we kind of go back to temperatures stateside, very cool through the Pacific Northwest as the onslaught of Pacific moisture continues. Again, as we mentioned a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, they've been so dry. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just not always the kind of weather you want to face when you go outside, when you're thinking about Memorial Day weekend. You're kind of excited about something else other than rain and cold. Hey, good evening, Jane. Glad to have you aboard this evening. West Texas, it's hot, but that comes at a cost because we've got the cold air this way and the heat and humidity in place, and that simply it means thunderstorms. In fact, there's another cluster there starting in the western Red River Valley. There's the severe weather that rolled through the Carolinas earlier today, and then the remnants of the cold that was in the west earlier in the week still slowly turning on the Kansas-Nebraska border right in through here. Still some unsettled weather with that. And then another surge of cold rain. My brother lives just in a little valley or a little town south of Boise. He showed me a picture of his rain gauge. And when he's got one of those plastic ones, they're very accurate. And he had a little more than 2 inches. I think it was about 2.05 if I remember correctly. But that's a lot of rain for those kind of locations where that's probably 3 months worth of totals, even this time of year. There's that low churning on the Kansas-Nebraska border, but it was this. You see this right through there? Those aren't clouds. That's a fire. Looking at the other day, still igniting, still active with the gusty winds and the very dry conditions across southern Colorado, northern Mexico right now. There's the radar with the rain and snows in a higher elevation out west, and then the explosion of thunderstorms in the southeast. But it's down this area. Kind of want to zoom in on Wichita Falls, where probably the storm chasers are just going ballistic right now because it is the golden hour where the sun gets low, the texture in the clouds begins to show up, and it just ends up being glorious. I tell you, there are very few thrills that are still legal that are as fun as storm chasing. You just got to be smart with all the civilian and all the non-chaser traffic because they can get a little crazy. I tell you, they can get a little crazy. thunderstorms in the southeast, a little bow echo just racing off the coast of the Carolinas. That's kind of moving out to sea. Those things are kind of scary as we move into the nighttime hours because you hear it. It looks dangerous. It's a little scary, but you can't really see what's going on, especially if the power pops off. All right, still mixed precipitation, higher elevation out west, fire danger in place through the Four Corners area, and then the severe weather zone in the red hashed, not quite as pronounced. It kind of gets mixed in with just severe thunderstorms as it migrates a little bit off to the north for Saturday, and then for Sunday, the whole mess. It just stays kind of damp in the middle of the nation, and this is what happened last summer, where we had a really, really slow start to the growing season. If you recall, we had the flooding on the Missouri River, all the flooding. There was a heavy, heavy snowpack across the Dakotas, not this most recent winter, but the one before in 2019. And then we had a big rain on top of that, and it just kept the Red River, Missouri River, the Mississippi just high through the whole spring. It was warm, and then it was cool, and then it just rained and rained and rained, and it almost appears as if we're going to be in that kind of a scenario. These are forecast record highs with within a degree or two of record highs anticipated as we move into the west, like Ely, Nevada, Hanford, California. So these kind of places going to be kind of warm. Really nothing tomorrow, nothing Saturday. Actually, I was kind of scrolled out there towards Tuesday. 86 it's probably Columbus or Medford, MFD. That would be in Ohio, obviously, because there's only one marker. But a couple of warm nights, a lot of warm folks, or a lot of warm overnight readings as we get into Tuesday in the California, and then get the strong south wind ahead of that storm that's going on out west. So that's kind of where we are for the week. I wanted to look at this one last map, and because it continues to signal some tropical activity. It's way out in the zone. We had seen it earlier, thought it'd be around 30, 31, 32 May, or 30 May, and then into the first part of June, but now it kind of pushes back almost a week. But this signal is so far out in the distant medium range that it almost isn't even worth considering. But it's still, the situation is setting up for a much larger scale favorable pattern for the Caribbean and then the Eastern Pacific through the first week or two of June. So we'll be looking for that. All right, if you're in the Southern Plains states, hang on. There may be some big storms to put you to bed tonight, or to get woken up to at some point through this Friday night. All right, everybody, take care and keep it looking up, and I'll see you on Monday, if not before.